Alright, welcome to your episode on the 10 most common trees you're likely to find in Oklahoma. We'll go around the backyard. We got to start, however, with kind of a basic botany lesson. Identifying trees isn't that challenging. I think you take one day, try to identify every tree you have in your neighborhood, and you'll probably have tree identification down for the rest of your life. There's all sorts of apps out there that can help you, books. For those of you participating in the workshop, hopefully we'll be able to push out a Forest Trees of Oklahoma book for you, which walks you through the process of identifying. But you got to know two basic things to begin with. We'll start by just looking at a typical leaf here. And every leaf at its base, here's the leaf blade, here's the petiole. At the base is what's called an axillary bud. Trees have buds at the end of the branches, but they also have buds and the axils of leaves. That's so if anything ever cuts this off, then that axillary bud can grow. You know where a leaf starts by finding that axillary bud. So the first thing to know is if there's only one leaf blade, so I'm going to pull this off, that's one leaf right there. With only one leaf blade, it's called a simple leaf. As opposed to something like this, where I look for the axillary bud and I can't find any in there, but I come back, well, sure enough, there's the axillary bud right there, which means all of this is one leaf. And because it has more than one leaf blade on it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 leaf blades on it, that's a compound leaf. So simple leaf with one leaf blade, compound leaf with many leaf blades or leaflets on one leaf. Alright, so that's the first thing you need to know. Simple versus compound. Second thing you need to know is opposite versus alternate. If every time a leaf, and here's one leaf, exactly opposite it on the stem is another leaf, that's called opposite leaf arrangement. As opposed to this, where every time you have a leaf, it alternates going up the stem. Right across this isn't another leaf, it alternates to the other. Then it alternates, then it alternates. This is alternate leaf arrangement. This is opposite leaf arrangement. Those are the two things you need to know. Simple versus compound, opposite versus alternate. So, quiz time. We've got an ash tree here. I don't see any axillary buds. Oh, tucked away in there is the axillary bud, which makes that one leaf. Simple or compound, and opposite or alternate is the question. This is one leaf, so it's compound, and in exactly opposite, there's another leaf, so this is a opposite compound leaf. One other thing I'll throw out there we might be talking about is the margins of a leaf. Margin is just the edge of the leaf. This one looks like a serrated knife, so it's a serrate margin. Alright, you are ready to identify trees. We're going to start with oaks. Two most common oaks we have in Oklahoma, or at least this part of Oklahoma, are post oak and blackjack oak. These are the ones that, when we were talking about the cross timbers, how they got the name, maybe they got the name because the two most common oaks, their leaves are kind of shaped like crosses. There's the post oak, there's the blackjack oak. The easiest way to tell the two apart is these are called lobes, like your earlobes, these big bumps on the outside of the leaf. If the lobes have little spiny tips on the end, that's going to be a blackjack oak. If those lobes don't have a spiny tip at the end, that's a post oak. So, no spines at the tips of the lobes, post oak. Spines at the tips of lobes, blackjack oak. And that's true across all of oaks. You want to look at that first thing when you're looking at an oak and see if the lobes have little mucronate or spiny little tips on them. So those are your two most common oaks. Now you can recognize them. As long as we're here, might as well do the Oklahoma State tree redbud. Easy to recognize because it has simple leaves, alternate, and they are heart-shaped or cordate. And it's in the pea family, believe it or not. And you can tell, there's a big hint, its fruit look like little peas. So there's your redbud. Alright, next tree is mulberry. We've got two different species of mulberry in Oklahoma. One's native, the red mulberry, which is the tree growing right over there, and the large one. And then we've got the white mulberry, which is the one growing right here. Red mulberry is native. White mulberry was brought to the eastern U.S. to try to start a silk industry. It's what the silkworm caterpillars feed on. And that failed, and people still plant it. It's edible. It's a little bit invasive, so probably not a good idea to plant. But both mulberries are fantastic for wildlife. You will see birds, squirrels, insects just hammering these things when the fruits come in. And the red mulberries are good to eat. I'm not particularly fond of the white mulberries. White mulberry will do first. One thing that's notable about these mulberries is how variable the leaves are. This is all the same plant with, whoopsie, with different shapes. This isn't going well. Of leaves. There's that, there's that, there's that. So if you find a leaf with really variable, or a tree with really variable leaves, some of them lobed, some of them not, it's a fighting chance that it's a mulberry. The red mulberry, a little different with the leaves, but still very variable on the leaves. I don't see much variation here. A little bit more bumpy on the top, but really great tree. If you want to see birds, cedar waxwings, we have a Swainson's thrush, which is hanging out up here eating the insects recently. You can hear the chickadees up in there right now. There they are. So great plant, but plant the red mulberry, not the red. This is a great spot to look at our American elm, one of the great street trees in Oklahoma and the United States. So let's go down and take a look at, the American elm. This is probably a good time for me to talk about, do you remember when it was springtime and this place looked like a big weed patch? Once you mow it, that looks like a normal lawn to me. Super comfortable to walk around barefoot, but that biodiversity is still in there, so I supported the pollinators. There's still that biodiversity, so you'll have a lot more different types of insects and things in there. So don't be afraid to let weeds grow in your yard. The lawn will be just fine. And it's early May. Didn't take long to look great. Here's our elm. Alternate leaves, simple leaves, serrate margins. And here's a weird thing. The leaf bases, the bottoms of the leaf, this is called the top or the apex. This is the bottom or the base. They're not equal. It's called oblique. If you find a tree in Oklahoma with simple leaves and oblique bases and serrate margins, chances are it's an elm. It's an extremely common plant in the forests of Oklahoma. And we have a number of different species. We'll take a look at another one here in just a minute. One of the most popular street trees ever in America. It got hit by the Dutch elm disease and devastated a lot of our streets, our tree-lined streets. But they're planting disease-resistant trees now. Hopefully we start to get a little bit larger presence of elms back in America. All right, we're at our green ash. Very common tree in Oklahoma, and it's pretty much the only tree or large tree you're going to find with opposite compound leaves. Pull these off. There's a leaf, there's a leaf. They're opposite one another and compound. Let's see, 2 leaves, 2 leaves, 2 leaves. Ash tree. And they get quite large. The lumber's useful. It's used to make baseball bats and tool handles and things like that. But if you look up, you can see how large the ash tree can get. Alright, we are at our bitternut hickory here. Here's the leaves. They're compound. You can see the axillary bud right there, and there's one leaf, but these are alternate. It's our most common alternate pinnately compound or compound leaf that we have here in trees in Oklahoma. So if you see this, it's a fighting chance that you're looking at a hickory. We have a number of different types of hickory, and many of them are really good for and really popular for woodworking, or cabinetry or floors. So a very useful plant. Makes little almost pecan-like nuts that are very popular with wildlife for eating. So hickory, our hickories, a lot of them grow horizontally like this because we have a very good population of Ents, of tree people here in Oklahoma, and one of their favorite things to do, and that the reason we have so many is the forest was never completely clear-cut, so they weren't harmed in the process. And you can look at the cross timbers episode if you want to see how that happened. But one of their favorite pastimes is limbo. So they'll take a tree, knock it down, and they'll come out here at night, very slowly usually, and they'll have a limbo party. So tree ants, who knew, right? All right, we are here at one of our pecan trees behind you. It's another one, and the leaves are just coming out on it now with alternate pinnately compound or alternate compound leaves. It's actually in the same genus. It's very closely related to hickory, and that's why the leaves look so similar. Usually hickory, at least the bitternut hickory, is smooth barked, and this has a really shaggy bark, the pecan. And you can come over here and see what I'm talking about. This bark peels off in big sheets. One theory about that is that's an evolution to be able to survive so many vines. As vines try to climb up this and steal it, that will break off and the vine might fall off. That's one theory on why with many of our hickories you kind of get shaggy bark on them. But these produce pecans. They're very thick-shelled pecans, and there's not a lot of meat in them. So the paper shell pecans are the ones that you really want to get for eating. You'll notice that this is kind of an Oklahoma variety of pecan. We've got one right behind me, and you can see our others. They grow horizontally frequently. That's because evolutionarily, over time, they've adapted to be able to behave like the Matrix, like Keanu Reeves with that, whoa! It's very slow. They're trees, you know, they don't move quickly, but it's to avoid tornadoes. So they'll see a tornado coming, and they'll just do that whole Matrix move. The tornado will go by, and over time, maybe 10 years or so, these will come back up, and they'll look like normal pecans again. Alright, here we are at my favorite tree in the world, which is Burr Oak. This tree, when it's allowed to grow out in the middle of a prairie or pasture, it grows enormous. It grows as wide as it is tall and has some of the most beautiful architecture. This is a young one here, but they'll live for hundreds of years. They have huge leaves, lobed leaves. It's in the white oak group. Same as post oak. You can notice it doesn't have any spiny tips on its lobes. Makes huge acorns. Like, I'm talking, you can cup the acorn in one hand, and that acorn, the shell of it, has burr all around. It looks like a ring of hairs all around the acorn itself. So Burr Oak, that's how it gets its name. Absolutely wonderful plant, and one of our best oaks. Next to it is hackberry. Hackberry, a lot of people confuse with elm. It's got alternate leaves, alternate simple leaves, just like elm, and it has oblique leaf bases where the bottoms of the leaves aren't equal, just like elm. But the way you can tell a hackberry from an elm is a hackberry has entire or smooth margins, and an elm has the serrated or toothed margins, and hackberry has 3 main veins from the base, and an elm is only going to have 1 main vein. So hackberry, if it's got those 3 veins from the base and smooth margins. The easiest way to tell a hackberry is looking at the bark, where it has these knobby projections on it. Very distinctive bark, usually on hackberry, but a very common tree in the forests of Oklahoma. Alright, we're going to head down one of our other forest paths here and see if we can find some more trees. Here's another example of the Burr Oak, a much bigger one. Here's an example of another type of elm called winged elm, because the stems actually have wings on them. It's a really cool look. All along the stems, they have that typical elm leaf with the serrated margin and the oblique leaf base, but the stems are winged. So winged elm, fun plant. Alright. Here we've got another cool plant called Kentucky coffee tree, and this one has tremendously compound leaves. There's your axillary bud down there, so this whole thing is 1 leaf, or this whole thing is 1 leaf, just a very compound leaf. Called Kentucky coffee tree because you can substitute the fruit for coffee beans. I've never tried it. I would suggest you don't either. But again, we've got an odd growth habit here. Here's the Kentucky coffee tree log, and they grow horizontally, and this is a different reason. It's just they're lazy. Just like, some students are lazy, don't get out of bed for class. Some trees are just kind of a lazy group, so they'll just lay down and grow. They still grow, they still put up their leaves, they just don't put a lot of effort into it. So Kentucky coffee tree, one of our laziest trees in Oklahoma. Alright, we'll come in for a closer look on this one. See if you can recognize leaves of 3. What that is? I'm trying to fool you. Leaves of 3, easiest way to tell if it's poison ivy or not is to taste it. I'm kidding. Don't put leaves in your mouth. Alright, but with today's lesson, you know how to recognize opposite from alternate. Poison ivy has alternate leaves. Boxelder has opposite leaves. So leaves of 3, but they're opposite, so I know it's not poison ivy. It's boxelder, which is a type of maple, very common throughout all of North America. Really fast growing tree, kind of weedy. We don't use the wood for a lot because it's weak, but common 3-lobed leaves. Sometimes they have a couple more than that. Opposite boxelder. Alright, we'll continue on down. Coming in and out of the sun. I'm not sure how this is going to work, but another common tree in Oklahoma, dogwood. Dogwood is opposite leaved and simple leaved. There's your 2 leaves. And the best way to tell dogwood is the veins, they kind of arc. They're arcuate. They kind of go out to the side and then they arc up. So if you find a opposite simple leaved plant, usually a small tree, not very big, and we have a number of different species, it's probably going to be a dogwood. Kind of cool thing, the veins have very strong xylem, so if you break that leaf, it will hang there just by the xylem fibers. It's kind of cool how strong they are. Remember, xylem is what transports the water and minerals up from the roots. So easiest way to recognize a dogwood is the bark. What is it about the bark? It's rough. Thank you. Thank you. I'm here all week. No, seriously. I'm here all week. Alright, I'm here at another type of oak we have in the backyard, a Shumard Oak, probably our most common oak when you get down in riparian habitats. Riparian means creekside or riverside. Our blackjack oaks and our post oaks will be our upland species of oaks, but when you get down in the riparian areas, you'll have your Shumard Oak and your Burr Oak as well. If you take a close look at the leaves, you'll see it's in the red oak group with little bristle tips, those spiny things at the tip of each lobe. And there's tons of different species of oaks in Oklahoma, and they hybridize, which means they cross. So sometimes it can be really challenging identifying the oaks. This one was knocked down by the Ents again. They don't just limbo, but the weird thing about Ents, despite being tree people, they don't like getting their feet wet. So what they'll do is they'll knock down large trees like this and then use it to cross when they cross over to the other side of the creek. So this is the Ent Bridge. Alright, we'll do a little bit of a talk and walk as we're heading off to our last plant, which is going to be the walnut. But here's a good example of that knobby bark on our hackberry. Here's an example of an elm. We've got another elm. We've got our hickory right here. This is a great plant called spice bush. There's a species of butterfly, a spice bush swallowtail, whose larvae only feed on that plant. So we have those butterflies around the backyard. There's a Shumard Oak. Another hickory. And you can kind of compare the Boxelder to the poison ivy. And look how you guys are learning. Seeing that it's opposite, I know I'm okay. Poison ivy is alternate. That means I'm not going to be touching it. So, it's you guys becoming botanists. My dogwood, opposite simple leaves with those arching veins. Got a sycamore tree, a number of sycamores. Sycamores are another tree that really like the moist riparian habitats. There's a cherry tree right here, black cherry, produces edible fruit. And now going through a grove of small hickories. An elm. Another hickory, and we've arrived at the walnut. My favorite tree for woodworking. It's called the King of Woods. Very easy to work, very beautiful, kind of a dark red color sometimes. If you look at the leaves, they are highly compound. Good example of an axillary bud right there. And then you'll see this is all one leaf with maybe 18, 19 different, or 19 or 21 different leaflets. So walnut, kind of a rough bark, valuable timber. So a tree like this might be hundreds or thousands of dollars if it gets lumbered up. Many times in Oklahoma, our walnuts grow horizontally like this. That's because these are the favorite trees for Sasquatch to nest in. And over thousands of years, those that grow vertically, Sasquatch would get in there, he tears up all the limbs up there. So those that have evolved to grow horizontally like this, Sasquatch doesn't climb up and nest in there, and we have a sizable squash population out here. So a lot of the Oklahoma walnuts you see growing horizontally like this as an adaptation to survive Sasquatch. So those are your 10 most common trees of Oklahoma. Start recognizing how much diversity is out there for trees. It's fun to try to identify them, and it's relatively easy. So thanks for joining us.